something which is relevant 30 years ago is not relevant, how can it be relevant now?
यत् इह अस्ति तद् अन्यत्र. Yat iha nasri asti na kutrachit. Our entire life, personal and professional, is about taking decisions.
Yes.
So how much more relevant does it need to be? This is the core thing. Yeah.
Since Vyasa was Pandava Pakshapati, so he has written what happened in the face of saying Pandavas only.
A rishi is somebody who's a realized person. He will speak the truth. You like it or you don't like it.
According to you, how important is this ashram? Why to be in Grahastha? I think it's good to be sannyasi. Everybody says, moksha chahiye mujhe. So why not be sannyasi?
That is why Grahastha ashram is actually called Ashraya Sarva Ashramanam. Of all the ashramas, this is the Ashraya. This is the base.
Was he arrogant to ask questions or is it okay to ask questions?
Shishyaste ham shadhi mam tvam prapanna. I'm your student. Teach me, I surrender to you. It is the soul, the Atma of Bhagavad Gita.
Shamata. Namaste, Amiji. Thank you very much for coming to our podcast. And it's our blessing to listen to you now. I'll start with one word which we always address everybody, Shamata, which actually means may peace and tranquility be with you. This is a word from Upanishad, which is given by our Gurudev to talk to anybody or to wish anybody. So we always wish well-being across, be it mental, physical, entire tranquility, well-being. So that's where we start with. And we wish you a lots of peace, lots of tranquility. Thank you for coming. And we'll start with very simple question, which we would like to ask you. Like, were you from childhood like this, reading books and writing books, or where did the journey start and how it happened?
So Shamatha to you, Pavanji, and namaste to everyone. Very happy to be here. We've been speaking for a while, finally getting to meet you personally. I'm really very happy I could come here. I have been reading since a kid. I think I have to be grateful to my mother for that. She ensured I and my brother, we always had books to read. And I think the one thing which she did very well was this. So bachpan se we've had books across languages, English, Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati. And in Hindi, especially, she used to get these books from Geeta Press, Gorakhpur.
Wonderful.
They have this amazing series for kids. It'll say Veer Balak, Veer Balikaएं. Basically, books which would help kids understand who should they look up to, yeah, based on stories of kids, stories of warriors, of Indian history and all of that. So had that exposure since a kid.
Okay.
And thanks to that, I think even today I find it very easy to read Sanskrit, Hindi and all of that. And for reading our text, I stick to reading at least Hindi or Gujarati. The meaning just becomes so intuitive rather than trying to read it in English. So yeah, I've been reading for a while. Yeah.
So in that reading, like, were you not, did you get any other narratives? Like, ye bhi sahi hai kya, wo bhi sahi hai, and you would be probably not only influenced by the people around, but by school or all. Were you like intrigued that ye kya hai? Or is it like, it's okay, I learned this as it is and we can figure it out later? Where did that turn happen?
So in the beginning, actually, I studied in Marathi in Maharashtra board, Mumbai board, yeah, not one of these CBSE, ICSEs and stuff. And in Mumbai, while at least I was growing up, the board was very Indic, if I may put it that way. We learned a lot about Shivaji,
Wonderful.
lot of Indian history, and not the twisted narrative. So that was not the problem in the beginning. However, after I went to do my management, that's when a lot of these narratives started, hitting you in the face. And you're like, oh, my understanding was very different. What I had heard was very different. What I have been seeing at my home is very different. Yeah. When people keep talking about how, as a culture, we have always oppressed women, I look back at my family and I say, actually, all the women in my family have been very, very empowered. Yeah. But then people say, okay, maybe your family was different. What about others? Yeah. So this struggle, trying to understand where the truth lies, a lot of this narrative I faced when I started doing my MBA. That's when a lot of these things about victimhood of women, I mean, I heard about that for the first time there. Of course, you've always heard that, women have troubles, women did not have all rights. That was one thing. But even our scriptures were were full of just oppression, casteism. All that hit me when I started doing my MBA, and it was so different from what I had seen at home. Nevertheless, 2013 then is the first time I read some books of Rajiv Malhotra ji. One was Breaking India, the other was Being Different. And I tell all my young friends, definitely read Being Different. So these books then got me thinking about the whole narrative warfare that was going on one hand. And on the other hand, I had questions about what does it mean to be a Bharatiya or a Hindu that I call myself, right? I was behaving in a certain way without overtly knowing what does it mean to be a Bharatiya. So those questions started. And then I remember once I had a discussion with a friend and we were talking about Mahabharata. And the question went to, why should we call Yudhishthir Dharmaraj? He did not show, he did not behave in line with Dharma at all. Yeah. He staked away his wife. He seemed to be very weak, didn't want to fight and all that. So he was like, why is he called Dharmaraj? And I'm like, yeah, that's correct. Seems like our texts are all over the place. They don't have any consistency. Koi bolta hai, he's Dharmaraj. Koi bolta hai, he's not Dharmaraj. Somebody says Draupadi, one of the greatest lady. In other stories, we hear that, oh, actually, she was in love with Karna and she was always about revenge and angry and all. And I was like, what's going on? Yeah. And there is so much fiction written about our epics. I was completely confused. I was not finding an answer to what is it that our epics, our itihas was really trying to tell us. Was it really, as people say, sab grey hai? You know, you must have heard that
Yeah.
Mahabharata says it's all grey. There is no right, there is no wrong, there is no dharma, there is no adharma. And I'm like, this doesn't even make sense, right? Now, if this is what we are teaching our youngsters, that it's all grey, they don't understand it and they go and they're attracted to other religions, I won't be surprised because they are so confused. There is no answer that our culture is giving to them. But then I realized that instead of stopping at that, like just, being okay with not finding answers, I said, I need to make one effort. I need to go back to the original. I need to go back to the source. And that's how then I started reading the Mahabharata, the Gita Press version, the Sanskrit Hindi version. So that's when I started reading the Mahabharata. Before that, I was already studying the Yoga Sutras and Bhagavad Gita and all that out of my interest. And I've been a yoga practitioner because of that, like asan practitioner, I must say, more than a yoga practitioner. So that's how the journey began.
Okay.
So essentially, yeah.
Thank you. So you are as confused as me also then. Because exactly that's the reason why also I've started reading like, okay, I heard this is good, I heard this is great, but I also heard somebody saying how it can be. But one question which keeps on coming to our mind, and since you have done strategy and all, a lot of people ask me, and probably the question which a lot of people have also is, how is it relevant now? Even if we take it happened. I believe it happened. A lot of people might not. Happened 5,000 years ago. Something which is relevant 30 years ago is not relevant. How can it be relevant now?
Well, who am I to say? We have our foreign minister, S. Jaishankar, speak about this, right? He says when somebody asks me about how should an ambassador be, I say it should be like Krishna. He says Hanumanji is one of the greatest ambassadors, diplomats, right? That's
Yeah.
what he says. So S. Jaishankar is saying it already. He's using our itihas to define the approach of our foreign policy.
Right.
Corporate to choti si cheez hai, I'd say. But that said, what is Mahabharata at the end of the day? Yeah, I am very sure it is itihas. Itihas is something that happened in the past. So in my mind, there is no confusion that it has happened.
Perfect.
And we are told that this Mahabharata, there is a shloka which says dharme cha arthe cha kame cha mokshe cha bharatarshabha yad iha asti tad anyatra yad iha na asti na kutrachit. Ki whatever you find in Mahabharata, you will find it everywhere else. Whatever you don't find here, you will not find anywhere else. Now, why are they saying this? Because at the end of the day, if you see Mahabharata or Ramayana for that matter, it deals with people. Strategy deals with people. Corporate deals with people. Of course, there are products, there are items, there are operations. But who does it?
People.
Who leads it? It's people, right? And even though we may have progressed technologically, as people, as human beings, our core instincts, our desires, our psychology is exactly as it was. What do we call are the Shaduripus that Krishna talks about, right? He says, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mad, Matsarya. He says these are the 6 enemies. lust, desire, greed, anger, ego, all of that. Yeah. And he says these are the 6 which actually stop us from taking the right decision.
Okay.
Okay. Then he says, hence, to take the right decisions, because when Arjun is confused about what should I do, that's when Krishna is telling him the Bhagavad Gita, right? And in that, what is he saying? That to be able to take the right decision, you have to develop Yogastha Buddhi. Now, what does he call Yogastha Buddhi? Sama Sukha Dukha. You should have equanimity, whether good or bad, whatever is the paristhiti, right? Don't become very happy if everything is going according to your way. Yeah? Don't become depressed if things are not going to be your way. Be a little detached, develop objectivity, and then take a decision. Now, I say this all the time. My background is business consulting. You are a consultant as well, right? We don't create a product.
Right.
And still, people call us and pay us. Why? And I'm talking about corporates.
Yeah.
Right?
Agreed.
Why do a company call me and pay me for giving them advice when I'm actually using their data? I'm using their information.
Correct.
And still they pay me.
Right.
Because I, as a consultant, get a third party perspective.
Perfect.
Which is an objective perspective. Why do I get an objective perspective? Because I'm not involved or attached in that situation. Right?
Beautiful.
I'm outside of it. Hence, I can look at their problems with objectivity. Yogastha Buddhi, which Krishna is saying, which they can't. Why? Because Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mad, Matsarya. So, if they themselves need to take the right decision, or individually for us, if we can pull ourselves out and develop the Sakshi Bhava, the observer view, which is the third party view, we will be able to take better decisions of our own lives, be it corporate, be it personal life, right? That is what Mahabharata is teaching us. It says there will always be sankata, there will always be confusions, there will always be dilemmas, right? Dharma sankat, what we say. But in that, how do you take decisions? That is the soul, the Atma of Bhagavad Gita, right? Our entire life, personal and professional, is about taking decisions.
Yes.
So how much more relevant does it need to be? This is the core thing. Yeah. I can talk about strategy, team management building, team building and all of that, organization. And we can take individual instances from Mahabharata that teach us that. I'll leave it one example. I use this all the time. In the Yuddha, in the Dharma Yuddha, Kurukshetra Yuddha, Duryodhan had 11 Akshauhini Sena. Yeah, he had a much larger army. Whereas Yudhishthir had 7. And still Yudhishthir won. Why? Now people say, oh, because he had Krishna. But how did he have Krishna? Krishna didn't offer himself. They chose the right kind of people. They ensured that the vision was aligned. Whereas on the other side, what was the case? They were all fighting amongst themselves. They were all not fighting for Duryodhan's cause. They were fighting for their own reasons, right? No vision alignment. Today also when we do strategy workshops, what do we say? Have a vision. Have a vision that is larger than yourself. Assemble the right kind of people. And when you assemble the right kind of people, give them space to work, right? So if you get somebody like Krishna, then you don't thopo your opinion on them. You wait, you take criticism, you take feedback. You humbly acknowledge what you don't know and learn. All these are qualities which Pandavas are showing.
Yeah.
We can have a discussion on this for another 2 hours.
Yeah, but I would say, I like to clap, but I would not because I would like to do this. This is the best example I've ever got in Mahabharata. Let me be honest, I've read so much, but this example to corporate part where you said the third party view, brilliant. I'm blessed to hear this. When you said Sanskrit and you've got the love of Sanskrit, I know it's a language which a lot of people say it's complex. Now, first, I would like to ask you, was it like when you saw it, you said you had books of different languages. Where did this love for Sanskrit come? First point. And second question is, did it help you to go deeper into these itihasas and help you the right narratives come in or right parts coming in?
I think what Ma did for me is that by ensuring I read different languages, the fear of learning a new language was gone. Yeah, I just naturally developed a liking for learning languages.
Wonderful.
And then I had Sanskrit in the school, and I used to do well. I think that is being a little bit thing that I learned well in school. So even when I've lived abroad in many different places, I have picked up a bit of the local languages. That is all because I was comfortable with the idea of a new language, which my mother did for me. Sanskrit, I liked it even when I was in school. So when I had to pick it back, initially it felt difficult, but the fear was never there.
Okay.
Also, the belief that how scientific, if I may say, Sanskrit is, right? Just the very simple example. We have ABCD in English. In Sanskrit, we have A, A, E, and then we have K, K, G, G, right? Now, if somebody says, what is the reason we have A, B, C, D, E? They'll probably say they were Greek letters or something like that, alpha, beta, gamma. That's it. But if you think of it in Sanskrit, that why is it K, K, G, G, Ch, Ch, J, J, T, Th, D, D, yeah? Let's do a simple experiment. When we say K, K, G, G, the voice comes from here. All of it. K, K, G, G, right? When we say Ch, Ch, J, J, it's the tongue touching. Yeah. When we say T, Th, D, D, the tongue rolls up. When we say P, P, B, 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 the lips are, you use your lips for it. So, do you see there is a design, even in the way our alphabets are structured in Sanskrit? It's just such a small thing. Also, when you say K, K, G, G. So, when we say inhale and exhale, right, that is just naturally happening.
Okay.
K, K, G, G, Ch, Ch, J, J. So, the pranayam, shwas, prashwas, is just naturally happening, like laghu and maha, shwas. That's how it happens. So, our ancestors had put in so much thought, even in this very
Language.
basic structure of it, right?
Beautiful.
So, how powerful this language would be if we take some effort to learn it. Also, if we know any Indian language well, Gujarati, Hindi, Marathi, any, I think Telugu is even closer to Sanskrit. Sanskrit is not difficult. I think the difficulty is getting that the mindset clear that it's not going to be so difficult.
Okay.
Now, one does not necessarily need to be a Vyakran Shastri in that. Yeah, at least at this age when we start. But basic Sanskrit is not difficult. There are enough and more courses out there.
Oh, wonderful.
So there are people who have adopted Sanskrit as their home language, their mother tongue.
Yeah.
And much later in life, they moved to speaking Sanskrit as home, and that has happened thanks to Sanskrit Bharati. They've done immense work in that field.
So when you started reading the critical version of Mahabharata, did you read the Sanskrit version or?
So I started with Gita Press. For me, the go-to is Gita Press.
Right.
And the reason I go to Gita Press is that they have Sanskrit and the translation.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So I am not a Sanskrit scholar.
Okay.
But I have a basic working knowledge. So when I read the Sanskrit and the translation, I'm able to identify if the translation is not correct.
Okay.
So that much feel I have now.
Right.
But the effort initially required was to ensure I just don't directly slip into reading the Hindi, but read the Sanskrit as well along with it.
So I'll tell you what, when I read the Telugu, the sloka, I didn't see he or she in that. But when translated, it was always he. Because it was translated probably 1900s and they told it was. And when I talk about that to my Yuva Bandhus, they say, what is this? Why she can't be there? I said, I'll go back to sloka. There's nothing called he or she, it was there. So beautifully explained. Thank you. Concept of itihasa, when we said thus happened, a lot of people actually come back and say, no, it was not, though it might happen that way. Since Vyasa was Pandava Pakshapati. So he has written what happened in the face of saying Pandavas only.
Okay.
Pakshapati is definitely we have there. So what is your view whether this happened?
Okay. So one is this, Vyasji was Pandava Pakshapati. And why do they say that? Because typically we believe that history is written by victors.
Correct. Yeah,
right?
That's what. Yeah.
And we've seen that if a person who's victorious writes the history, he distorts it. Now let's come to Vyasji. Who was Vyasji is the question we need to ask. How do we come to the inference that he was Pandav Pakshapati? Why would he be Pandav Pakshapati? First of all, Vyasji is a rishi. Okay. Now, in our tradition, in our parampara, a rishi is somebody who's a realized person. He will speak the truth. You like it or you don't like it. But even then, let's ignore that for a while. Then let's ask the question, who was Veda Vyasa? he was the son of Satyavati. Okay. Then he was called to do Niyog with the wives of Vichitravirya, who is another son of Satyavati, right? Ambalika and Ambika.
Ambika.
Through Ambalika and Ambika, Pandu and Dhritarashtra are born, and through their servant, Vidurji is born. So Dhritarashtra, Pandu have the Rakta, the blood
Of Vyasa.
of Vyasa, which means he is actually the biological father,
Ideally.
which means he is the biological grandfather of Kauravas and Pandavas. So why should he be Pandav Pakshapati? He's a grandfather, right? Acha, now let us assume he had to be Pakshapati.
Hmm.
Whose Pakshapat would he really take is the question again we need to ask. Who were the Pandavas? They were the son of Pandus, but was Pandu the biological father? No. They all 5 are born through Niyog, right? So if somebody has to be a Pakshapati, he will be Pakshapati towards people who are his own blood, no? He would have been Pakshapati towards Kauravas, if at all.
If at
Because
all.
Duryodhan had his blood.
Right.
Yudhishthir didn't, right?
Right.
So on what basis are we saying that he is Pakshapati? There cannot be a more unbiased source than the own grandfather of the Kauravas and the Pandavas.
Beautiful.
He had no reason to say Pandavas are better than the Kauravas. Why would he, right? He had nothing to gain. He was a rishi who wanted to ensure that coming generations get to know the truth of the itihas so that dharma, artha, kama, mokshanam, upadesham samanvitam. So that itihas basically has the upadesh of dharma, artha, kama, moksha. We get the right lessons out of it.
So that's I think the best answer again. I think today is like my blessing. Because I could not answer it. And a lot of times I searched again. I think that's what the most of the parents do. If I don't know the answer, I'll probably keep quiet. But I think this is a great answer. You are exactly told me the relationship of grandfather, right? If we actually look at it. You're right. I don't know why. Then why is he not Pakshapati of Duryodhana? I should ask people now. You used a word, Niyoga. And I read your book multiple times. A lot of people think, what is this having baby with somebody, man? Is it not adultery? Kunti Devi having adultery with all the people. Then I didn't have an answer. When you wrote in your book, Mahabharata Unraveled, what is Niyoga? I really was admired. So can you explain a little bit about what is like legal in this, if we come to current world?
Yeah. Okay.
And how can we compare the current world Niyogas happening?
Yeah. So we have to understand the difference between adultery and Niyog. Yeah. Adultery is when two individuals, for the sake of pleasure, for the sake of sensual pleasure, only for Kam Asakti, get into a relationship, which is not legal, so to say. Correct. They all have their individual partners. Right. Yeah. But what is Niyoga? One, Niyoga, so adultery is also without the knowledge or consent of the partners. Right? In this case, in Niyog, that is not the case. One, Niyog happens only after the consent of the husband if he's alive, or the family of the husband if the husband is not alive. Okay. The other purpose, and the purpose of Niyog is not Kamasakti. It is not sensual pleasure. The purpose of Niyog is Praja Utpatti, having a child. In the case where the husband is either not capable of producing a child, or he's dead already, so cannot produce a child. And there is no hire or lineage of that person to carry forward. Now, if you see the construct of Sanatan Dharma, so to say, Grahastha Ashram is key, basically a householder's life. And in the householder's life also, the objective, one of the key objectives is Praja. Ensuring that babies are born. Mm-hmm. Why do we need babies to be born? For the lineage to continue. Why do we need lineages to continue? Because if babies are not born, will the earth survive? Will the human race survive? No, right? So when we say that we have Chaturvida Purushartha, in which one is Kama, right. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, right? Why is Kama considered a Purushartha, a pursuit worth living up to, a pursuit worth following? Why? Because without Kama, Praja Utpatti will not happen, right? And Praja Utpatti is the goal, one of the goals of Grahasthashram, of a householder's life. Now, if a couple does not have a child, should they be deprived of a child forever? Today we have processes like surrogacy, IVF, all of that. Aaj bhi wo sab hai na? There they did not have surrogacy and IVF. They could have probably adopted a child, which they did, but the other was also allowing one intercourse, so to say, with somebody who was chosen by the family
Okay.
to produce a lineage, to produce a child.
Child.
And that child still had the name of the husband of the wife,
Oh, okay.
not the one who produced it.
Okay.
So that is why if you see for Pandavas, while they say Indra, Ashwini Kumar, all of that, we don't really know who these people are,
Right.
right? They could be anybody. The idea, the point is, it doesn't matter who the father is. The idea is only to have a child. It is not for Kama Sakti.
Kama.
Also, there are rules as to how the companionship has to happen. The guy has to put a lot of tail on his body and all of that. So pleasure was supposed to be cut out of that
Oh.
entirely. That's
Okay.
how New Yoga used to happen.
Wonderful. So that's a lot of science behind it. Then,
Lot of thought which has gone in that a lady deserves a child.
Okay.
If the husband cannot provide it, doesn't mean it's the end of the world.
It's not then. When you said Grahastha, I know this is one of the ashrams. So, according to you, how important is this ashram? Why to be in Grahastha? I think it's good to be sannyasi. Everybody says, moksha chahiye mujhe. So, why not be sannyasi? And what is this like Vanaprastha and all? Is it like old age homes being tailed? But I would say, can you just be sannyasi? Can everybody be sannyasi? Why Grahastha? Why do you need
Okay.
Grahastha?
So let me start by explaining what is dharma. Yeah, because the end goal of all the ashram vyavastha and everything that we have is dharma sansthapan, ensuring we have a dharmic society. Yeah. So what is dharma? Basically, Mahabharata, Ramayana, they all talk about dharma. Now, dharma is typically understood as responsibilities, duties, justice, ethics, religion nowadays. Yeah. Dharma is all of this and a lot more. In Sanskrit, every word has a dhatu, a root word. The meaning is derived from that root word. For dharma, the root word is dhr, which is the same root word for dharati. Yeah, so it's dharanat dharmityahu. Dharmo dharayati praja. Yah syat dharana sanyuktam sah dharma iti nishchayah. Dharanat dharmityahu. Because it upholds and sustains, it is called dharma. What does it sustain? Dharanat dharmityahu, dharmo dharayati praja. Dharma sustains praja. Praja as in the society. Society made of people and living beings.
Right.
Because it upholds and sustains, it is called dharma.
Okay.
Okay, that is how Krishna and then Bhishma, they define dharma. So they're saying dharma is about sustenance and upholding. Yeah. Sustain what? The society. If everybody starts taking sannyas and not having kids, will the society survive and sustain? How that can? It won't, right?
It won't.
If everybody today decides that we don't want kids, khatam. The world will end there.
Yeah.
Right? We don't even have to wait for some big happening to happen. No Rudras dance and nothing required. There and there we are all khatam, right? So why then do we have the ashrams? The ashrams are a structure given to us by the ancestors so that we live this life in a way that is fulfilling and aligned with our own biological needs and status at that point in time, according to our age. The first ashram is what we call brahmacharya,
Okay.
which is young age. That is the time when kids have to develop capabilities, have to gain wisdom, to be able to live a fruitful life when they grow up. Yeah, to be able to. So that is also the time when they acquire skills and capabilities. Why? So that at certain point in time they go and start earning. They become resourceful. Yeah. As of now, the resources are being provided by their parents. Now that parents' age, where the youngsters or the householders are getting married, are generating resources, that is called the grahastha ashram. And in this ashram is when the dharma, artha, kama, the three purushas are getting worked upon. Yeah.
Okay.
Artha, because resource generation happens there. This is the young age when people actually can work hard physically, generate wealth. What do they do with this wealth? Take care of themselves, take care of people around them. They nurture their kids.
Yeah.
right? They produce kids, they nurture their kids. So it's karma and also dharma, because it's not just their kids, they will give some charity, or they're supposed to. So that others, like there are gurukuls would function. People who are now getting old cannot be resourceful anymore. Their own parents are getting taken care of, right? How is all this happening? Because this is the age which is being resourceful, producing kids, and taking care of all of them. Then we have Vanaprastha. Vanaprastha, Vana is basically once somebody reaches 50 plus. Yeah.
Okay.
That's how it was then. Now the ages could be different.
Okay.
Basically, there they are saying, my responsibilities are now over.
Okay.
I have generated wealth as much as I had to, I could. I have ensured that there is continuation of my lineage. I have children. I have taken care of all my responsibilities till now. Now I'm letting go.
Okay.
Now is the time only to focus on my spiritual growth.
Okay.
Okay. Basically, every generation has to hand over responsibilities to the next generation, right? To say, okay, now you decide. Even if you make a mistake, that's your call. But I am stepping out. This way, there is harmony in the family as well. Because if we have only one person deciding all the time, that also leads to discord, right?
Right.
But at a certain point, that person is saying, okay, enough. You drive now. I am done. I will sit, I will meditate, I'll focus on the Bhagwan, and I will get ready for my departure from the earth.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's when a lot of jnana, the study and all that starts happening at the Vanaprastha. Now, after that, some may take sannyasa, some may not take sannyasa.
Okay.
When they say become a sannyasi, that's the last ashram, they give up everything. They give up their home. In Vanaprastha also, they may choose to give up home. Yeah, not
Right.
necessary, but they choose to give up home.
Right.
In sannyasa, they also disconnect or disengage from their own identities.
Oh.
A new name is taken. They will not stay in one place
Okay.
for any period of time. They will keep walking. Yeah. They will keep studying, walking, all that happens. And no comforts. They will ensure that they are not living in any comforts. But that is eventually.
Okay.
Also, sannyasis, if you see, lot of our rajas were inspired by sannyasis to take up great projects, great endeavors. So it's not as if they don't do anything. Yeah, they still continue to inspire people in their own way while themselves remaining out of the society, so to say. Yeah.
Oh.
So these are the 4 ashrams.
Ashrams.
Now, in this 4, as you see, the resource generating ashram is the Grahastha ashram. Yeah. And Grahastha ashram is where the pursuits, as I said, of Dharma, Artha, Kama are actually being fulfilled.
Okay.
That is why Grahastha ashram is actually called Ashraya Sarva Ashramanam. Of all the
Oh.
ashramas, this is the Ashraya, this is the base.
Okay.
If Grahastha ashram falls apart, who will fund the Gurukuls or who will take care of the children?
Okay.
If Grahastha ashram falls apart, how will the lineage continue? How will the elderly be taken care of? Right? Who will take care of the sannyasis? Because they survive on bhiksha, or they used to, right? In those
Right.
times.
Yeah.
So Grahastha ashram is extremely important. And as far as possible, everybody is encouraged, or they were encouraged by our rishis to go through the Grahastha ashram.
Mhm.
In fact, all our rishis, be it Vashishtha, be it Vishwamitra, be it Atri, everybody, they were all Grahasthas.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
They were Grahasthas, they had wives, they had children, everything. So, being a sannyasi, chalo man mein aaya sannyasi ban jao. Ek to it doesn't work that way. Yeah,
Okay.
a sannyasi can really become a sannyasi when there is some purva janma sanskar.
Okay.
It is not about running away. Okay, if today somebody says, "Arey, I'm done with life. There is lot of problem. I have lot of debt. Don't want to handle anything. Run away." No, no, no. That is not how it works. Because if you see, this is what Gita also Krishna is saying, na. How many times, as we were discussing, is Arjun saying that, "Arey, no, 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 I'll take the Gnan Marga. Sannyas is good. You are saying detachment, detachment, detachment.
Let me take.
Vairagya. I will take Vairagya only, na.
Yeah.
Why do I need to fight at all?" And Krishna says, no, there is no running away. If you are running away from your responsibility, that is not sannyas, right? That is not the right approach. You have to develop Vairagya towards the outcome,
Hmm.
while continuing to work and fulfill all the responsibilities that you need to as a part of this human society, as a part of this ashrama, of this samaj that you need to do. You have certain responsibilities, right? Because as I was saying, dharma is about sustenance. Now, sustenance of what? Samaj, as we said. or any unit for that matter. For example, our body is a unit, our kutumba is a unit, right? If this kutumba, if this family needs to survive and sustain, every stakeholder in the family has to fulfill certain responsibilities. When they fulfill those responsibilities, they get the benefits out of this unit. They get love, they get nourishment, they get nurturing, they have support when things are not going their way, right? But if I say that I want to take from the family, not give anything back, will that survive?
No.
No. So that system, that unit will survive only when all of us fulfill our responsibilities, right? Similarly, for even the Samaj, we all have our responsibilities, and even more the Grahasthas.
Okay.
So Grahasthashram is the key. And consistently in our Shastras, we are told to go through the Grahasthashram. Let's take one last example from the Taittiriya Upanishad. Taittiriya Upanishad is basically the first part of it, the Shikshavali, is about a professor, a guru. It's a convocation address of students who are passing out.
Mhm.
And he's telling them, Prajatantum ma vyavatsasi. Basically, don't cut the Prajatantu. He's saying, do your Havan, do your Agnihotra, teach other students, have kids, get married, have kids. So even the students of the Gurukul are not being told ki chalo jaake sannyasi ban jao. They are saying, be a grahastha. And then when the time comes, when all your responsibilities are done, then it is time for Vanprastha, and then it is time for sannyas. That is the principle behind our ashrams, why it is that way. At which time, first take responsibility and then give up. Let go. Let go the authority, let others take a call. Yeah, that's how it was. It was not about running away.
So I think when I was talking about Taittiriya Upanishad and Gurukul, I remember my Gurudev saying this because I've been talking to my Gurudev since last 10 years, and every time there is a question which comes like, when is the next step? He says, why? I want you to go through the Grihastha Ashrama. So he always says, if you run away, you will run away from me also.
Wow.
So if you come running away to sannyasa, you will run away from sannyasa also. So how much you will run? So
Correct.
I don't want you to run away from anything. Once your duties are over, I'll tell you what you have to do. Right now, your duty is for the society. I
Absolutely.
think beautifully told. Thank you very much. So when you said the concept of guru came in, according to you, you have read so many itihasas and you understand Indic things, how important is to have a guru? Now I understand, but most of the times I keep getting things like, why one human being, man? Like,
Mm.
okay, why can't you just learn from books? अरे यूट्यूब में तो पढ़ा है बहुत सारा, तो गुरु क्यों चाहिए? So what does our Sanatan Dharma talk about
So,
the importance of a guru?
so for us, a guru, even the way they define it, right, is the one who shows you light in the andhakar, who takes you away from the andhakar and shows you light, who shows you wisdom. The way I see it, a guru is somebody who provides you an anchor in life.
Huh.
Basically, whenever you are in a dilemma, there is somebody who says, take a step back, think through, and take the right call, right? Somebody who holds you back. Somebody who holds your vrittis back because you have that kind of belief in him, yeah?
Right.
So that Shraddha, it works both the ways. You are manifesting that Shraddha and you are surrendering to him. So again, I go back to Gita every time.
You have
When
to. I love that.
Absolutely. When Arjun, he's very confused in the beginning, yeah? And he says, Na yotse Govinda, hey Govind, I can't fight and all that. And Krishna is like, Prahassana, he's smiling and saying, what, yeah? You are crying over something you shouldn't cry and you're thinking you're a pandit and all that, right? So then again, Arjun says that I'm very confused. Karpanya dosho upahata swabhava, hai na? And I'm completely dharma sambudha cheta. I'm confused completely. Now you tell me what I should do, in which there is shreyas for me. Shishyaste ham shadhi mam tvam prapanna. This line is very important. That's when the Gita comes out. When Arjun says, Shishyaste ham, I'm your student. Shadhi mam tvam prapanna. Teach me, I surrender to you.
Okay.
That surrender brings in a sense of humility. It's that humility which makes us open to take in wisdom, which may not have come otherwise, because we have so much biases, so much kachra in our head, right? But when we say, I don't know, I'm willing to surrender, that's when you're saying, okay, I'm willing to open my head, right? And now what comes to me, that is very pure from somebody you trust and somebody who has agreed to send their wisdom to you, that's when that wisdom comes. So I see Guru as that anchor. Now, is it always a human Guru? I think it requires some sort of destiny to be able to find a Guru like that. Some people who have found it are very lucky. There are others who may not have found it, but that doesn't mean that it is the end goal of it all, right?
Right.
Books could be a guru. I say this to a lot of people about Bhagavad Gita. I think it's a magical book. Anytime there are thoughts in my head and I'm confused about something, I just have to open any page and that page has the answer. Yeah, it just seems like that, and I know that it works like that for many people. The book itself is quite something. For others, it could be their parents. For some others, it could be the bonding that they have with their ishta,
Okay.
who's at that deity cosmic level, right? So it could be anybody. I feel like we don't have to we don't have to get too obsessed about finding a guru, because I truly believe that when you are ready, the right guidance will come your way. It could come in any way, right? Sometimes when the time is not right, the person might be standing in front of you and you wouldn't have
Yeah,
taken
yeah.
anything from them.
Right.
So I say that continue doing what you're doing. Continue to pray that, keep your mind open, that always be ready to accept what comes your way. And when the time is right, a guru will also come.
Wonderful. So 2-3 very important things out of this is blessings, which to have a guru. And one more thing is Gita. When you said you opened the book, and I was telling in one of the previous season of podcast, I did this experiment with my daughter when she was, I think, probably 11 or 13. She was going through certain things and said Gita has other answers. She said, how can it be? How possible? Kuch bhi hai saath. So how can it be like every answer you go to that? I said, you try, ma. And I was praying to Krishna, bachalo mere ko. Then she didn't tell me what trouble she's going through. She said, open. I said, you open. She opened thing. And I explained what the verse talks about. She read, hey, this answers my question. I was like, oh my God. So from then onwards, she goes and reads Bhagavad Gita just because she knows somewhere, I think, some magic is there. And this actually, we turn it into our Yuva Bandhus. We talk to our Yuva Bandhus. And I keep repeating in every podcast because one of the other person might listen to this formula, I call it. 7 verses a day. You can't read slokas, you read the English transliteration. Don't worry about the meaning. Keep reading. 7 verses a day, 100 days, you'll finish one time. In a year, you might, with the breaks and not, being lazy and all, 1 year, 3 times. So I've been reading it since last 4 years, 12 times.
Wow.
So no meaning right now, right? When I started, like, I don't know the sloka, I don't know the meaning. I have Gurudev, but Gurudev said, don't ask me, wait. So I write down if I have a question and then probably ask him anytime which I have then. But after some time, I stopped asking questions from it. I started getting answers. Now I read that book. It just answers me like
see, it happens.
Anything. It happens. So I keep telling, and our Yubandhu is also saying, yeah, it happens.
It works
so
all the time.
Yeah. So I keep telling this formula because it might help many people. When A plus B whole square helps many people, this formula might help.
I might just add one point to that. Sometimes if somebody knows their mother tongue well, it's better to read it the mother tongue rather than the English.
Oh, wonderful.
That's been my experience as well. Because the meaning becomes a lot more intuitive when you read it in your own mother tongue. Aajkal, a lot of people, the mother tongue has become English, so it's a different thing. But if there is a possibility, I think you connect way better if you read it in any of your languages.
So what Gita you would say? Gita Press again?
I would say, actually, there are lots of versions, right? At one point in time, I had very strong opinions about one versus the other. But I realized that different things click for different people. What didn't click for me might click for somebody else.
So
now I say, give it a shot. Read different things. Something might appeal to you. Just don't stop because one version didn't appeal to you. That's one thing I will say. That don't stop because one version didn't appeal to you. In some versions, the language is so flowery, it's not, it almost feels like it's not meant for Indian audience, So, chhod do se, pick up something else. What works for me is the simple translation that comes on Gita Press.
Wonderful.
But even Ramakrishna Mission works are very
Advaita,
good. Yeah, even Chinmay Mission works are very good.
Going to Gita, this is my favorite topic anytime. Now, you see, when you go to 18 chapters we have and 700 slokas. I see Arjuna, after listening 500 slokas also, he starts asking. Like, I feel, Arjuna, you're listening to Paramatma. He gave you Vishwarupa. The best part is, after the beautiful Vishwarupa, 11th chapter, he asked question in 12th chapter. Like, what are you, Arjuna? Like,
Mhm.
you saw the Vishwarupa and you're asking the question. Is it allowed? Like, what was he? Was he like, was he
See,
arrogant to ask questions, or is it okay to ask questions?